welcome to episode 255 of our SAP on Azure video podcast. Today is August 7th, and together with Goran, we are here to talk about anything related to SAP and Microsoft. Hello, everyone. So in my role as a product manager, I try to stay in contact with customers as much as possible. On the one hand, I can help customers get started with new innovations, but I also get to learn and hear from their feedback. So at the last Sapphire, it was great for me to see Geoff Scott, CEO of ASUG, the American SAP User Group, that he was on stage during the keynote of Thomas Saueressig. Geoff has always great insights when it comes to customers, and I'm glad that we have him back on our show. Welcome, Scott. It's really, really great to have you here again.
You know, you and I have done what? First of all, thank you for inviting me into episode 255. That is a massive number. You should have confetti going off just for that folder. That is tremendous. And I've also had the pleasure of being on your podcast a number of times. So thank you for inviting me back. Most people never invite me back again. So I'm thrilled to be, you know, I think at some point, like Saturday Night Live does these 5-timer club where you get a jacket. Some point in time, I'd like some Microsoft swag from you that denotes that I'm not at 5 yet, but I think we're getting pretty close. And then last year, I had just the joy because you were in, here in North America for the Microsoft event and conference, Microsoft Ignite, which was in Chicago in November, if memory serves. Yeah. And you were here for that, and we had a chance to host you in our ASUG studios to have a podcast, which was tremendous. So it's wonderful to see you online. Always better to see you in person. But thank you for having me in today.
Well, thank you so much. And again, I mean, being there in your office in Chicago, that was also really fantastic. I mean, you have a much more professional setup I have. Let's be like that.
Well, we do this. Well, thank you for the compliment. The team here at ASUG does a tremendous job on putting this all together and trying to make us look like we actually know what we're doing. So they do all the things. They just can't manage the host, and that's where this gets a little weird, right? Is that they do everything they can to make us look good, and then I get in front of a microphone and everything falls apart.
No, absolutely. You have a fantastic team, and I love working with them. I love the content that you're creating. I've been a very active listener now of the ASUG Talk podcast that is being released very often. So there's some amazing content that you're publishing there.
Well, thank you for the compliment. We have taken ASUG Talks to a weekly format now. We are way behind your 255, and maybe one day we'll be able to catch up to you. But the team has done a really nice job of putting together a really nice podcast. And, we follow in your footsteps, my friend.
Oh, let's see. Good. But I already mentioned Sapphire. So Sapphire 2025 in Orlando. There was obviously also a Sapphire then in Europe. But
did you get the chance to go to both?
As mentioned. No. I just went to Orlando, actually.
Okay.
This year. Yeah. But it was, I liked Sapphire, actually. It was better than the last ones, I think. So I really loved, obviously connecting with everyone, but also the messages that were there. And as mentioned in the intro, I also thought it was a really good idea to have you on stage there to present not only one or two customers.
You're one of the few.
But it was good. It was really, really good to get this customer perspective in.
Yeah.
So I know, I mean, you were super busy at Sapphire, obviously. We had a chance to meet there in a few meetings, but I know that you were
podcasts. Keep up the compliments. I'm going to have you on every podcast just to keep my ego up.
Okay, now I'll stop. No, but what I wanted to hear from you is there were so many announcements, there were so many discussions, obviously, with the customers. So what was your takeaway? I know it's been a while since Sapphire, but still, what was your takeaway from Sapphire? What did you hear from customers? What did you take away from SAP, actually?
Yeah, it's a great question. So first and foremost, while you say that there were a lot of announcements, I actually think SAP has done a good job of starting to dial down the volume. And one of the things we've spoken to SAP about, and by the way, the Sapphire and ASUG annual conference next year will celebrate its 20th anniversary together.
Oh,
So
really?
we've been collaborating on this for almost 20 years. And we talk about a lot of like, where's the customer mindset? What are they thinking about? And one of the comments I've made to Christian and his team is fire hosing announcements at the community, while great for you, is a lot of information for them to try to digest and ingest at the same time in an environment where there's just so much going on. So I've kind of have this notion of this Tao that says do more by doing less. And I think the more we can be repetitive, the more that we can stick to the conversations, the better the odds are that the customers will pay attention, right? And so I think that there's a risk that everyone kind of goes into information overload, and at some point just their brains short circuit and they go, I don't know what to do with any of that, so now I'm just going to start looking at my email on the show floor or in a keynote because it just is too much to comprehend. But I think that what are some of the key messages, right? Of course AI is a key message. How is this whole AI thing going to manifest itself inside of enterprise technology? What does that mean? How is SAP working with this? And you and I are going to get into some conversations about Copilot and Joule. So how do customers rationalize all of that? At the same time, to your point, there's a massive migration happening across the customer base of moving from legacy ECC environments to a modern day S4, whether that be private cloud or public cloud, and most are going private cloud. What does that mean? And many of them are like heads down trying to get that thing done because there's this 2027 to 2030 date that keeps getting closer and closer, the march of time. And so how are we as customers trying to do that? And for many customers, that is a complex set of maneuvers to modernize that architecture at a time when I think that call for modernization is more important than ever from a North American perspective, from a global perspective. And so, I think we're on the right track here. So as I've said to SAP time and time again, how many various random variables do you want to throw at the customer simultaneously and then, wonder why they can't do any of it or why they're not doing the thing you said because, they're up to their, eyeballs and other priorities. And SAP talked about suite first as well. So they said cloud, AI first and suite first, right? And those I think are some really big commentary. AI first, there's no big surprise there. We've all been talking about it. But what does this thing suite first mean, right? And how do customers really want to think through that? And how do we actually as customers respond and react to that? So I think that those are some really good themes that they brought up. Not 100 of them, but let's focus on a couple of really core ones, right? And I think that the conversation continues to be grounded in, I think Christian Klein, when he gets on that keynote stage, brings a tremendous presence of philosophy and strategy and a broad customer notion of where the customers need to go in this highly complex and competitive technology landscape.
No, you're right. I think that this suite something really interesting. I think it's very clear that in the past it was really scattered a lot, and I think now this idea of the suite first was interesting. I also loved this flywheel that they talked about because I think they a lot of things together. So AI, as you said, AI first, yes, and AI has been SAP has talked about for quite some time with AI, but now with the flywheel, for example, they're really talking about bringing this together, about bringing the AI, about bringing the data, about bringing the application layer together and really leveraging the strength of each other. So I think in this maybe not too many announcements, but bringing them together to some extent.
Yeah, I think that you're correct, and I'm still trying to process the notion of what this flywheel is and what it means, right? So I don't know that I have this completely sorted in my head. I think I sort of get it. But I think that it brings up a tremendous number of opportunities and opportunities for clarity around how do we want to think about this flywheel. One of the things that I wonder about, Holger, is how do we as customers really use AI capability to help drive the modernization of the SAP stack faster? I know that there's a tremendous amount of use cases out there where SAP says, here's all this brand new capability that you can take advantage of. But I get it, but so many of the customer base is trying to move, as you and I just spoke about a few moments ago, from ECC to S4. I'd like to see us use AI to make that process more automated, higher quality, less risk, doing some of those. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity to try to leverage some of these AI tool sets to achieve those outcomes. And that's what I think about.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree. I think and we are seeing this with several partners actually that are leveraging AI to look at your code, to look at to make it clean core compliant, to help you with the transition. But actually, I also think in the end the goal, what customers also want. I mean, this just helps them in the transition. But in the end, they also want to be able to leverage AI in their daily business, basically in their business processes. And from an SAP perspective, this is obviously SAP Joule. SAP just announced the general availability of SAP Joule Studio, which allows you to build additional scenarios. Now, at least here in Germany and in Europe, I would say that Joule obviously is bound towards private cloud edition, public cloud edition, to success factors. So we see, or I see, I mean, obviously I don't have all the insights there, but I see most of the project, the Joule projects currently being done in the context of an SAP success factor, because success factors is already in the cloud. Everything is there. You have the identity figured out and stuff like that. But I mean, there are certainly a lot of other projects also with private cloud and public cloud, but I think the adoption, I have the feeling, could be even better. So what from an ASAP perspective, do you see what's the view of the SAP Joule adoption? What are customers looking for? Where maybe you already see a successful SAP Joule implementation and usages with customers?
So let's go to some statistics, right? So you opened up a great question, and I wanted to share with you some research. And I think this is important research that we've done in collaboration with you at Microsoft. So what do we see, right? We see that most of our members are still in the planning phase about using Joule. So 41%, in a recent survey we did, are still in a planning phase for Joule. 8% are using. And I think you pointed out, why would that number not be higher? Well, what version of SAP am I on? Is that version Joule enabled, right? And I think one of the reasons why we see higher adoption rates with success factors than we do with, say, S4 at the moment is because that is a more cloud-based public cloud product, right? So it's easier to use that product to get to that outcome, and it's easier to embed some of that AI feature tool set in that product. One of the things that I think when we talk about broad, and I've had this conversation with a number of customers, the broad IT strategy, right? Where do we as customers need to be? And if we believe that AI will be a foundational tenet of the future of enterprise technology, then the only way to get there, I believe at the moment, is to constrain down the number of software tools you're using in your portfolio, right? So why does AI first from SAP make sense to me? It makes sense to me because if I can constrain down the number of different pieces of software I'm using, I probably have a higher degree of probability that I can roll them up into a broader AI environment and landscape. If I
Hmm.
continue to go to best of breed and I'm using, lots of different point solutions, how do I aggregate that data in a meaningful way to have an AI tool be able to interpret it, summarize it, and provide insights? Especially if all those different tools are moving at different velocities, they're
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
different
yeah.
things, right? So to me, we are the victims of our own success in the sense that in years past and time past, it's been pretty easy to go out and buy subscriptions of software, right? And it's very easy for the line of business folks to go out and do subscription based. But now they're saying, I want all of this rolled up into AI. And it's like, well, that might be an impossible task if the IT portfolio continues to proliferate and get bigger and bigger with more and more nuanced esoteric data sources. It creates a massive amount of chatter and fragmentation that is really hard to understand.
Mm. I mean, we can talk about data in a second, but just to address, for example, the scattered data when we look at the SAP and the Microsoft stack. I think that's and I was lucky at Sapphire. I actually had a session together with SAP where we talked about our integration between Joule and Copilot. And it was, I mean, we had a huge audience there. It was really amazing to see the interest. But for me, that's actually really like the best of both worlds. Joule obviously knows your SAP landscape best. Joule perfectly integrates in SuccessFactors, in S/4HANA Public Cloud, in S/4HANA on-premise, and so on, or Private Cloud Edition. So Joule is really great to get all this data. Now, Joule has no idea about the Microsoft stack. So, and that's where Copilot comes in. Copilot has the best integration, the best knowledge of the Microsoft stack, of your emails, of your Teams messages, of the documents that are shared in SharePoint. And now instead of I would say forcing Joule to learn Microsoft. I really like the idea, the concept that we developed there with SAP, that Joule would just ask Copilot to get the relevant information from the SAP
Yeah.
system. So all of a sudden, yes, it is a crazy Microsoft pool data, which Joule has no idea. And similarly, it's a crazy SAP data pool where Copilot has no idea. But now bringing these two agents together, I, as the end user, I just have one agent that I'm asking, whether it's Joule or Copilot, but I get access to all the information, both from the SAP and from the Microsoft side. And I think that's where individual smaller agents, and we'll probably it will take some time to really have an agent-to-agent integration across all the different agents out there. But I definitely see a way how these smaller agents in the future will help us to get a better understanding, a better grasp of the data that is flowing out there.
Yeah, so I think you're spot on. From a customer perspective, what that means and what that infers is I am not going to be a customer of a single AI product. I'm going to be
Mm-hmm.
the customer of multiple AI products. And then the next magic word that starts with an I pops up, which is integration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we've struggled with integration. I kind of think about it as you describe this, Holger. I go, gosh, the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because now we're talking about having to integrate AI bots and agentic AI and all this other stuff. And I had I'll get to that example in a second. But the thing for me is, how many AIs do you potentially need in an organization? And
Yeah.
how do you manage the explosion of the AIs? And are we in a scenario where we're on this brand new frontier where everyone brings their own? If every single software vendor, and I think this is an example of where I applaud Microsoft and SAP, because you are both trying to figure this out together. How do we use Joule? How do we use Copilot? And the reality is that most SAP customers are Microsoft customers,
Yep.
right? So
Yep.
there should be a tremendous amount of synergy between both organizations, and them working together. You and SAP working together has a tremendous amount of benefit for the customer. So I know from time to time that relationship has jagged edges And sometimes that relationship
Sure.
doesn't work quite as well as we'd all like it to. And certain people have various different philosophies about certain things. And there's certain words that start to, create certain triggers for other parts of it, right? But for by and large, for the customer base, a strong Microsoft, a strong SAP, and a strong partnership together is in the best interest of the customer, right? Because both of you together creating great software has a tremendous amount of impact. So, but at the same time, everyone else wants to come to the table with their AIs. And how
Yep.
many AIs can we use before we
Yep.
kind of go flying off a cliff and we just are in this circular spinning world? I played around with some agentic stuff a few weeks ago, and for me, in my role, I can sometimes live in this strategy philosophical space, and then after a while, I need to go out and actually build something or touch
Hmm.
something to figure out whether what I'm saying makes any sense and can I actually do what I'm talking about, right? Can I not just preach, but can I also execute, right? And I found it interesting, and I had this epiphany where I started with down an agentic AI example, and I tried it in BTP, and I tried it in Microsoft, and the good news is neither of them worked very well. Um, the other thing is probably the use case I was trying to do was ill-conceived at best to begin with. So I might have been a little bit too optimistic in what I could get done. But I walked away with some valuable learning. And the light bulb that went off in my head all of a sudden was it kind of feels like we're back in the early stages of integration 101, right?
Hmm.
Where, because one of the things I was trying to do, and I was using and I was using a third AI. So I was playing around with Copilot. I was playing around with Joule, and I was using a third AI to coach me how to
Oh,
make
okay.
all of this work, right? And I appreciated the coaching, which was mostly sort of kind of right. Um, but it said, well, you need to go find an AI for that, an API for that. And
Hmm.
there's no API for what I want to do. I just want to screen scrape something off a website. And then like this light bulb went off in my head, Holger. Wait a minute. I feel like I'm back in the 1980s and 90s mainframe days when we were screen scraping data. I mean, yeah, I'm going to really date myself. When we were screen scraping data off of mainframe screens
Yep.
in
Yep.
order to move it into another application, I'm like, okay, because not everything has an API,
Yep.
right? So, if agentic is going to require APIs everywhere, haven't we just, kind of catapulted ourselves back into the 1980s and 90s when we were trying to create integration across these apps? So, I like where we're going, but it's at some point in time, doesn't the AI have to be able to be self-healing and self-mending in the sense that, one of the great disadvantages of going back to that old screen scraping technology is it was very brittle, right? If
Hmm.
anyone
Hmm.
moved a field, if anything
Yes. Then it's
changed,
broke. Yep.
everything broke. And so I wonder if we're back to that kind of day and age where now, if AI is equally inflexible and someone makes a change, does it all break again? And it's
Mm.
interesting to watch how much change is happening out there and how trapped so many customers are because they have so many downstream dependencies on data. They're almost afraid to make change
Yep.
because
Yep.
if they make a change, they don't understand where it might pop up further down the line.
Yep.
It's a long-winded answer to your question. So all of this has tremendous opportunity, and we're just at the beginning of it.
No, I agree. And I mean, you should revisit your scenario maybe in 3 months or in 6 months.
I
The
think you have
speed of
to.
innovation. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you have to, right? Because the question is, and, and this is going to feed into another conversation you and I are ultimately going to have is if I'm a customer, what you and I just said is tremendous from a product development perspective, but awful from a production support perspective, right? So
True.
as a
Yes.
customer,
Yep.
where do I jump? And when
Yep.
I do make that jump, am I sure that I don't have to go back in and re-architect again? Or I
Yeah.
have to go so, to your point, when you ask, hey, why are customers seeming to lag behind the curve on adopting all of this? I think it's because they're trying to figure out when they're standing on the sidelines, when do I jump into the game, or do I want to watch a couple more plays develop? I'll use an American football analogy. It works in soccer as well. Do I just want to jump on the pitch and just go run around and kick a ball, or I'm going to watch the players a little bit so I kind of understand where I want to play? And the larger the organization,
yes, yep,
the bigger the risks of those things are.
yeah, yeah. I mean, for me, when it comes to this collaboration, it was great to hear Nestle also at the Sapphire ASAP event. Basically, they were on stage. They were clearly saying, "Look, we are an SAP customer. We are a huge SAP shop. So for us, Joule is set. We will do Joule." But they also said, 80% of my employees are not in SAP. They are not opening up an SAP screen. They are in the Microsoft world. They are in M365. So for us as Nestle, it totally makes sense to have Copilot as the Copilot, but then have Copilot integrating in Joule. So for them, I don't know if they would then integrate yet another and yet another and yet another agent in there. But for them, SAP and Microsoft are key pillars. So for them, there is a Copilot, there's a Joule, and we'll integrate them together so that in the end, 100% of the employees have access to the SAP system, have access to an AI, to the SAP system, but via this Copilot Joule integration.
Yeah. Think about the power of that integration, and you have a customer, you have an ASUG member who's using both, and you're right that maybe they don't have access to the UI, maybe they don't want access to the SAP UI, right? But we want to give them the best data. So can they use Teams to help fill in that information? Can they integrate that information into an Excel, I just hesitate to say this, but we'll go here, into an Excel spreadsheet, right? I don't want to create, and we've all kind of been part of the world of Excel spreadsheets that kind of become big old Frankensteins, right? And start to kind of create all sorts of decisions. But maybe there's a way to head that off at the pass and say, hey, those decisions you're making in that spreadsheet, in these cells, is not based on the latest data. So you may potentially be creating risk, right? Or PowerPoint, right? Many of us are still huge PowerPoint users. How do I integrate that data to get even better PowerPoint examples? I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. And then on the flip side, if I'm in Joule, can I use those Joule tools to pull back information that might be happening in chats, in Teams? Pull back information that might, tell me where these spreadsheets are, where there might be enterprise risk, that we're putting data into spreadsheets that, and decisions are being made that may not be the right ones.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely correct. So, I mean, you mentioned data already a few times, and obviously data, the business data cloud was a huge topic. We have DataSphere. We have a
lot of customer interest in that. Yes.
A lot of customers. But then obviously from a Microsoft side, we also have Microsoft Fabric. We have Power BI. We have a lot of customers that want to integrate Power BI with the Business Data Cloud, for example, or with other SAP data. We had a few episodes here on our show specifically on the integration of Fabric with SAP. There are lots of partner solutions out there. There's a lot of connectors out there that allow you to connect your Microsoft BI stack with the SAP BI stack. When you look at customers in the Americas, what's your feedback? What do you hear from customers on this?
I'm going to get very quiet here so that everyone turns off the microphone on this podcast, because I have to be quiet because I want to say something that SAP always gets very upset about. There's a lot of Power BI users out there. Right?
Oh, yes, there is.
Power BI is a very popular, very well-used tool to do data aggregation and reporting in the SAP space. And SAP gets a little fussy about that. I didn't say that, but this is on a podcast. But the reality is that, some of the Power BI tools are very good and customers are very familiar with it, including that class of customers that we sometimes refer to as citizen developers, right? Who don't necessarily have all of the requisite SAP skill sets, but they want to get to the data and they want to aggregate it and they want to understand it. So it's all for the right reasons. So I think when it comes to data unification, why is BDC so interesting to the customer base, right? And to me, I have three kind of aha moments that BDC brings me. Number one, if I can create a semantic layer that now allows me to describe data and understand how that data is working, that could be a positive, right? I think that's a positive. Number two, if I can use this semantic data to help me simplify my ETL, extract, transform, load operations, all the code that I'm running to get data out of SAP and put it into various data lakes, which we also know historically can be very brittle operations that break frequently and have to be retuned as SAP changes, the ETL has to change or something happens and this happens, right? So we have a lot of IT resources that are being utilized to keep that infrastructure running. So if I can use some of these tools to help simplify that, that might be worth a lot to me. And if it's coming back to our AI, if I can help use AI to stop breaking on things all the time, that would be huge. And then obviously, I think those things make sense. And then the third aha moment for me is, if I really believe that there's a future AI-enabled enterprise tech out there, then there has to be a synergized data model somewhere that's driving it. And if I can now put AI over that synergized fabric, and whether that's, and I'm going to be agnostic. I'm playing philosophically here. Whether it's a Databricks or a Fabric or a Power BI, I'm going to leave that debate for a little bit later. But if I can do that, and now you, from an AI perspective, can actually use a consistent data model, and you can run your RAG processes against that, or you can use that to kind of make sure that you're actually seeing value from that AI. Now I see it opens up a huge wealth of opportunity that I had to make. So I was always thinking, Holger, hey, if I have to actually layer AI on top of my SAP version X, how effective and efficient is that? And does that ultimately prohibit me from going to version Y because I got to redo all that? But if I can actually put that in a common layer, that might have some real architectural benefits. So that's how I see this playing out. And I think that realization that opportunity is there, I think is incredible. And I think, if customers, and coming back to, I think a hybrid Joule Copilot world makes a ton of sense. Using Power BI to kind of help drive off a common data model, thumbs up, go for it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and I think that's what I wanted to talk about next is this partnership, this collaboration. And I know the data topic can be a little touchy, but there's so many other fantastic examples where Microsoft and SAP, at least from my point of view, work really, really well together. Again, if we look at Joule and Copilot, if we look at identity management, that SAP basically recommends their customers with the deprecation of the identity management solution on-prem to go to Entra ID, with all the work that we're working very, very closely with their development teams at the moment. I think it's really, really great from my perspective how the partnership with SAP is going. But what do you see? Because obviously I'm in the Microsoft SAP bubble, and I see where it's working really, really well. But what's your impression from looking from an outside in perspective? How do you see the partnership between Microsoft and SAP?
When I see it through the lens of the customer base, it is a crucial, I say that a third time, crucial partnership. Again, as I said earlier, most SAP customers are also Microsoft customers. I think the percentage, and I don't know, we have hard data on this, but I would estimate that 90 to 95% of SAP customers are also Microsoft customers in the enterprise space, right? Which is SAP customers, right? Because the only other alternative they would have would be Google Workspace. And I don't see a lot of conversations about Google Workspace. And I don't mean by saying that, I mean to undermine what Google has done with that. But I think most customers who are SAP, especially Holger, if they've been around for a while, and most SAP customers have, right? That's where they started. So we have to start with that foundation, that that relationship is incredibly synergistic and dependent, right? Most of these organizations are using Microsoft tools. SAP is their enterprise data source. They're using that to drive the enterprise transactions. And then they're using Teams. They're using PowerPoint. They're using Word. They're using Excel, right? They're using Copilot. They're using all these other things to get other stuff done. So number one, that has to work well. And I think the stakes on that are higher than ever and only are going to get higher. So from a customer perspective, we would say, please, SAP, Microsoft, work better together. And by and large, I think you guys do a great job of that. Yes, there's friction from time to time. We understand that, right? But by and large, you guys have a tremendous partnership. Keep going, because the only people that would be hurt by a bad partnership is your joint customers. Right? So that makes a ton of sense. And understand that we will use both things. So don't fire shots at each other because someone's using more of this or more of that, right? Whatever, right? Let's just figure out how to make, because I think at the end of the day, both organizations win. So I think there's a tremendous amount of opportunity there. Integration is going to become a big deal.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
Right. It's always been a big deal. And as a matter of fact, we're seeing this bear out, that our statistics and our research shows that the amount of intra-SAP integration is actually going down, but the amount of inter-SAP integration, meaning SAP to other things, is going up. So SAP to non-SAP is the most relevant scenario that customers talk about. In our research, it's about 88% are fiddling with that, up 11% compared to 2023. So it's a big deal. And I think AI is driving that. I think all this other stuff is driving it. So I think it's important to think about, how do we make sure that both of you, both SAP and Microsoft, present a unified front to customers, not an ununified front.
That's why I love talking to you. You have all these insights from your surveys, all the data points where you can really quantify what is actually, so it's not, I think this might go this way, or maybe this is important, but you really have a lot of data that you can ground your arguments on. So
yes,
maybe also to slowly wrap this up. I mean, TechEd is unfortunately in parallel with ASUG TechConnect this year. So I will not be in the US. I will
wait a minute. You're going to Berlin?
I'm going to Berlin, yes.
You see, you have two choices here, Holger. This is very disappointing to hear. We do know, and it's an unfortunate planning issue between SAP and ASUG about how this all kind of came together. But unfortunately, both events are on top of one another, and this is the only year that's going to happen. It was just a whole series of unfortunate things that occurred that ended up here. But Berlin, I don't know. I mean, if I had to go, I mean, who wants to be in Berlin in November when you can be down in Lexington, Kentucky, at the home of the Churchill Downs, horse country, and bourbon country? What could be better? So, I think you're making a bad choice, Holger. I think you need to be in the south part of the United States for ASUG TechConnect in November. So now that you're telling me you're going to be in Berlin, I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, maybe I can convince you to come to Berlin.
Episode 255 ends abruptly. No, I'm kidding.
I
can't come to Berlin. I've got to do a similar thing here, and I actually played a cruel trick on my team, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to Berlin, so figure it out." They were not happy. They did not think that was a funny joke. So
no. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to TechEd in Berlin. I think this is the first TechEd, the on-site TechEd in Europe for a very long time. I think the European community is very, very much looking forward to this. I'm looking forward to connect to a lot of colleagues from mainly Europe, I guess, because I guess most of the US colleagues will go to ASUG TechConnect, and I'm sure you'll have a fantastic show. But maybe actually, yeah. So
we are digitally enabling the two events, right? So one of the things we are addressing is the keynotes will be co-broadcast. So, we are going to make sure that we're covering various pieces and parts, Now there's still a time zone difference to deal with here. So our morning is your European afternoon. So the good news is we're holding you away from going out and having fun in Berlin. We're just getting our day started. So
well, let's see.
There will be.
I will wave to you from Europe then when you're on stage at the keynote in ASUG TechConnect. But just are there any things that you're excited about ASUG TechConnect, or what are the next big things that you plan from an ASUG perspective, which maybe I can attend later on as well?
What I'm excited about is the continued, progress of all of these AI tools. And how are they actually being put to use and productive use inside the customer base? That to me is a tremendous opportunity that customers really need to understand. I think earlier in our dialogue today, we talked about how customers are going to sit on the sidelines until they can figure out when to jump onto the field, right? And I think one of the things that motivates them to get on the field is hearing from each other. What are you doing? Sometimes the stories from Microsoft and SAP get discounted. When the real world reality of this sets in, I think it actually creates a tremendous amount of positive momentum. The other thing we try to do at TechConnect, which is much more difficult to pull off in Orlando every year, is hands-on stuff. So it's not just easy. It's not just good enough for you to hear this. Can you open up your laptop and can you actually do some of this? Now, it's going to all be surface level stuff because we all know that getting deep takes time, but at least it gets you started. And I think for some people, getting started is really important. I think I learned so much by experimenting. That it's important to have that time in your day to do that experimentation. And if all of us are spending most of our days trying to keep production running and keeping the lights on, we don't have enough time to experiment at a time and place where this experimentation is so critical because the technology is moving so fast.
That's exactly what I love about TechEd, about TechConnect, that you have the chance, if you go there, like you're away for 3 days or 2 days or whatever, and you have time to sit down and do something and really explore, really see whether the marketing slides really reflect what is there in the product, and you can really get your hands dirty basically. And I think that's always fantastic.
And I always thought that the timing of the event was very important, right? That it was held in kind of the latter part of the year. So this could be a great opportunity as you're thinking about setting priorities for 2026 and you're thinking about budgeting for 2026. Where do you want to go as an organization? Where do you want to focus? What do you want to think about? As I said earlier today, Holger, I think one of the best things we could do as a service to the entire customer base is help them put these AI tools to better use, getting them onto both private and public cloud editions of SAP. If we can use these AI tools to help simplify code, explain code, if we can use these AI tools to help moderate and understand data, point out where risk factors are, prevent mistakes from being made, to your point, interrogate, customizations that are made to make sure they're clean core compliant, I think those things all have tremendous value. I actually think those, from a very self-serving perspective, are far more valuable than talking about some of this other stuff that, makes a lot of sense, but only makes sense to the extent that the core is intact, right? As you and I talk about, how do we do data analytics? How do we think about Fabric? How do we think about Databricks? How do we think about BDC? None of that matters if we can't seem to get these systems into the next generation of tech, or when it comes across, the data is bad and we're spending 6 months to a year, getting the systems and getting everyone back to ground level one before we move forward. I mean, we ain't got no time for that. right? So
Nope.
we've got to figure out a way, and ideally, to me, in a conversation I've been having over and over again with the community, we as customers need to get out of the coding business and the code maintenance business and get into the innovation business. And if we are imprisoned by keeping the lights on, we can't innovate fast enough. And that to me is a systemic threat and an existential threat to us and our ability to innovate going forward. Because what then happens is the business does innovate; they just innovate around us. Right. And so the very thing that we want to avoid, which is, having a huge mishmash of different pieces of technology in our portfolio, exactly is what happens because we can't move fast enough.
Yeah.
I think, every time I sit down with a customer and we have these kind of very pragmatic conversations, I leave with my head hurting because these are very complex conversations. It's not as if the customer base doesn't want to do this and the ASUG customers don't want to do it. They do. It's just like, but they have the reality of keeping their current businesses operating and moving forward.
Yeah,
it's a good place to end for today.
Exactly. I was just going to say these are great places to explore, to see what's out there, what's really working. So
always a joy chatting with you. Always a joy.
Same here. So I will not see you at TechConnect, but I will.
No. I think I made a convincing argument for you to come over the ocean and come to Lexington, Kentucky, versus coming to Berlin. I mean,
I'm not sure
I know
if I'll
Berlin.
do that.
I know Berlin's closer, but we're so much more fun.
Yeah, let's see. I think we'll also have a lot of fun.
I'm not doing a good job convincing you. Okay, I will start pestering you with AI enabled reasons you should attend.
And I'll reply with some AI agents. No, Geoff, it was really great to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And let's chat after both events, and also have a thought process of what did we learn and take away.
We'll do that. Sounds good.
Awesome. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you so much. Yeah. See you.
See you.
Bye-bye.